All right, let's introduce ourselves.
Hello, my name is Janez Potočnik. I'm co-chair of UNEP International Resource Panel. This is my main task, which I do.
We are in a very strange period because we have a lot of technology, and in a way, the first thing I thought to ask you after I heard your speech is technology a friend or an enemy at this point regarding the environment?
Technology is definitely a friend, but it's like with all the technologies, you have to use them in a way that they are in service of people, and we also have to be aware that unfortunately all questions cannot be solved only with technological support. So if you have, as we did, designed an economic system which was designed by industrial part of the world, which is wasteful and which is also unjust, we need to ask ourselves also how to basically change those relations in production and consumption, which are leading us that we are behaving like we are behaving. And unfortunately, some of the signals which we are receiving on the markets as producers and consumers cannot be changed by technology.
Is it a matter of regulations, what you are trying to achieve and what circular economy, let's say, mandate is trying to achieve? Is it a matter of creating laws for things and then things will fall into place?
No, it is important and necessary ingredient to have the level playing field for the companies, to have some direction taken by the governments, which could be taken by some of the regulation. But I would in the first place like to see that the market signals are sending us in the right direction. And currently, if you are producer and consumer, if I would a bit simplify, production capital, it's overvalued and over-rewarded. Human capital, labor, it's undervalued and under-rewarded, while in many cases nature it's not valued and not rewarded at all. Nature has intrinsic value indeed, but immediately when nature is put on the market, then of course if you don't value it, you don't value it, and then we see what are the consequences. So we face a lot of destruction, depletion of natural capital. So it's if you are a consumer, for example, if you have to pay much more if you buy environmentally friendly produced food, if you have to pay much more for a car which is, for example, much more environmentally friendly, then of course you are, through the market rules, incentivized not to go in that direction. And that is because those who are actually selling us environmentally more harmful cars or environmentally more and more unhealthy food, they are not paying the premium because they are destroying our quality of life and nature. And that's all part of the market rules. That has nothing to do with regulation. Of course, policymakers can try to remedy that, in particular through the tax system, where simply taxing more what you would like less, taxing less what you would like more, using public procurement rules for the right purposes, or using state subsidies for the right purposes, or even getting rid of the tax havens, which are still existing even in Europe, so which are basically escape rooms for rich people and rich companies. So it's a lot what we can do still on the markets, and you do not need exact regulation that's done. But sometimes also regulation is needed, and my point was always that simply regulation and market signals need to send consumer and producer in the same direction.
Right.
You can't send it with market rules in one direction and then with regulation in other direction. And of course, that's a lot of confusion on the markets and a lot of lobbying by business sector, because market rules are telling them, no, you should behave against the regulation which was set. And that's not actually the situation in which we would like to be, isn't it?
Depletion of natural resources.
Yeah.
These are the words you use now, and as I understand, you use a lot.
Yeah.
And they are going to be used a lot in the future, as I understand.
Yes.
For the for the civilian, the median income civilian. All these have to be understood as well. Do you think Europe is doing something for that? Because we are all in our little cocoon, our own personal microcosmos, our everyday lives, problems, prices going up, prices of fuel, whatever. So if something is needed, I feel, is for everyone to understand what these three words mean. Do they really understand what these words mean? Because even the word depletion is very strong.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Everybody doesn't understand them. What I'm saying normally is, when you look to the situation in which we are putting the younger generation, actually we are taking a lot of loans. Why we are taking a lot of loans? That we would live better than we are living. We are actually destroying nature. Why we are destroying nature? That we would live better than actually if we would not destroy it. But that's all indebting future generations. That's my point. So you have to take care. So you need to take into consideration that we are not the first nor the last who are here generation which is here on this planet, and that also when you look at sometimes we hear, for example, the arguments that we need to take care in the first place for competitiveness of this moment. But how many times we are asking ourselves how much of our well-being is actually based on the fact that in history we were pretty much somehow being colonializing a lot of people, nations, and in particular in nature, because access to nature, access to water, access to land, access to precious metals, access to, oil, gas, they are the essence of the well-being of the nation. And that's why in the history it was always like that. And a lot of our well-being today is actually based on that. And I think if we are honest enough, we see and understand that there are huge differences among people and in the well-being today. And we have to help those who are living on the edge that they have a decent life, because this is minimum what one needs and deserves. And all that is basically the Global Resource Outlook of International Resource Panel, which I'm co-chairing, is very much talking about those issues. It's very much talking about that access to and use of natural resources matters, and that it's important, and that it's very much in the core of the question of equality and fairness also, and that you can't ignore those issues if you want to live in the world where you would like to avoid conflicts, when you would like to avoid migrations, because those things are running exactly people from their homes, and then we are getting them also in Europe, and we are complaining again because they are disturbing our peaceful life, if I can put it like that.
Yes.
So it's it's a bit of fundamental honesty. It's not betting those things.
There's a lot of talk about these rare components, rare critical raw materials,
Yeah.
and these are terms again which are becoming popularized now. Normal people read about them, understand about them. So since we have a lot of technology, because that's how I started this conversation we're having, why cannot we find a way to balance things and have the technology to reuse these rare critical materials and not again deplete them from on the one hand, and also destroy the environment or have them be very expensive? It sounds like a win-win-win situation. I mean, use them again, I win, not deplete, I win, and not destroy the environment, I win. So how come technology is not advanced enough to do this?
All that what you are saying, it's logical and it works in a situation which is stable. If you need what we need now, and where these terms are coming into the play, is the fact that we need much more than we have of certain materials if we want to make energy transition possible. And energy transition, it's necessary ingredient. We all agree that it's necessary. So you need them more on the side of the renewable energy production. That's on the supply side, but you need them more also For example, in conventional car needs much less than actually electric car of those critical raw materials, which means that also with the transition on the demand side, we are basically very much using additional. So recycling in the situation where, for example, you would need in 10 years 10 times of batteries of today, so it means that your demand is growing, and this lower part is actually entering in 10 years to your recycling.
Okay.
You know, and that's why if it's growing need, recycling needs to be done, but it's not really
It's not
the
enough.
answer.
But isn't it at some point going to balance out?
Yes, it is, but we are talking about transition.
Okay.
And how to make it, and our point is, okay, there are other ways how we can limit the use of that, and that's it when you talk about how to meet your mobility needs, how you meet your housing needs. Is it truly absolutely necessary that each one has its own private car? If not, we could spend a lot of energy there, we can spend a lot of materials there, and that would mean that also that transition of that these critical raw materials which we additionally need would be much less than actually is the situation today. So that's how, but I will never be against the approach which you explained, but indeed when the situation is such that it's growing.
When we have finished the transition period.
When you finish the transition period, when you have as much, but you always have to understand that also it's connected also with population growth.
Yeah.
It's connected also with the fact that some nations are still developing fast and they will catch up. So it's not it's not transition to be finished in Europe. It's all that economic
global
population, it's global, and that will continue. So the need will continue, and recycling will be an important part of the solution. But it's most important is that we ask ourselves the question: how can we meet your needs in more energy and resource efficient way?
Let's talk about travel and transportation, because I think transportation is a critical thing. We talk about globalization, and we somehow evangelized globalization 20 years ago, but we never understood that with globalization in such way we had to buy the very cheap shoes from China, which cost $1 20 years ago, but we had to transport them and use fuel and use packaging, blah blah blah. So let's talk about the transportation of people and the transportation of goods. Now, where are we now in that? Because after COVID, we have lots of conversation about that, and I understand that you're very well informed. You see that people, for example, they want to travel and do leisure travel to enjoy the world, because they say, sorry to put it in a very simple way, we don't know if tomorrow there will be another disease. I want to see the world. So we have, on the one hand, all what we're talking about. On the other hand, everyone wants to get on a plane and visit as many places in the world as possible in his lifetime or her lifetime, whatever. So transportation of people and transportation of goods via air and probably trains, but wherever the train system is well established. What are we going to do in that area of aeronautics, air transport, etc.?
There are two answers. One answer is, of course, if one would continue with traveling on a level like you have explained, likely this would contribute to worsening the situation in which we are. Likely climate will hit us even more than it's already hitting us. So we need to be mindful when we think about where we go and how we go. But on the other hand, in this international, so if you would ask me, for example, transport in the city, I think you can arrange it very much differently than today.
Yes.
So it's mobility and all the options. If you would ask me, rural area, it's a bit more difficult, but still you have few-seater cars or maybe a kind of mix between buses and so new ways of services which would be offered. If you ask me for the continent as Europe, there is obviously some fast train connections and so on, which are much less damaging. But on cross-Atlantic, which you was mentioning, there it's only two ways. One is the one which I mentioned before. The other is that you make that transport fossil fuel free. So hydrogen or other electricity options probably will be more hydrogen, because the big planes need solutions which are a bit different than the individual cars. But so you need to make the supply side clean then. And making supply side clean, it's already something which we are seriously trying. But my answer is always we will still have to be mindful of our habits and a bit ask ourselves whenever we afford a travel or food or whatever, what has an impact of that.
Are you, in that respect, thinking about a certain policy on that? For example, someone has to, in a way, pay a more expensive air ticket because he will have to compensate for his pleasure and all that?
Absolutely. I think that there is no other way than actually to we constantly try to say that if this is not part of the signal to the consumer, like we started our discussion, then of course he will behave like, or she like we behave today. So it's for me absolutely clear that this should be part of the prices which we are paying.
This is a very difficult thing to tell to a generation of people.
I know, listen, but I'm also saying at the same time that we would absolutely need to simultaneously work on socially more equal and so on. So yeah, there will be the questions when we will have to ask why some people are so rich and why some cannot afford even to travel on when they would need to pay the ticket, which includes the price which connects it with the environment, health, and so on. So it's difficult, because we are locked in a world which is wasteful and unjust.
Yes.
And both needs to be addressed hand in hand. Otherwise, we will have a lot of riots on the streets. Otherwise, we will have a lot of people who will not be happy with their lives, and that's not a future in which we would like to go.
So, for example, here, and I will end with this, regarding the technology, we have to have some breakthroughs. What you described, you said hydrogen, there's a lot of talk about synthetic aviation fuel and all that. So we will have to spend money on research. I'm not saying this will solve the problem, because obviously the solution you say is the solution. It's hard, but we have to spend money to do something, to transform a whole industry, which is also a thriving European industry, because...
No doubt about that. By the way, I was Commissioner for Science and Research also.
I know.
So I know very well that any money which you invest in science and research is actually returned very well. And I'm absolutely in favor of that we invest more in finding the solutions which are more human-friendly and more environment-friendly. The more we do of that, easier it is. But at the end of the day, still, one cannot deny that somehow we are used to a life which unfortunately is using too much energy and too much resources to live inside safe planetary boundaries. And we know very well that this is a problem where, in particular in high-income countries and also inside the countries, those who are rich people will need to participate more than they are currently.
Greece, I would like to end with that. We are not a very high-tech country, but you have a lot of experience in the European Union, but all the countries, I suppose also for Greece, the country I'm from. Do you have any ideas about Greece, how it could participate in this process, in this talk we're having? What are, as a country, its main advantages, as a geographical position, as the way of in the industrial base?
I think it's important that your government simply understands how logic, which is based on circular economy, is supported. By the way, whenever, because you ask me how to explain those coded words to simple people. Circular economy, it's how nature works. Yeah? So nothing is lost, everything has its purpose. And the real question behind is, are we part of nature, humans, or not? Because sometimes we behave like we are not part of nature, and that's our problem. So naturally, for the Greece, it's absolutely fantastic when it comes to natural resources. But you are also one of the most exposed, climate-exposed parts of Mediterranean and Europe, and it's clear that you might be hit even more than average. And being mindful of that, being behind those policies, being an advocate for that also on EU level is helping you also individually as a nation, because one needs to be aware that while you have many of those benefits, you are better aware than I am, you also have to be aware that when it comes to future challenges, you are quite in a delicate position, and it is good that you think and look a bit further ahead that sometimes we are currently used to look at, because I remember from my own country, Slovenia, last summer was disaster. There was
from mine as well.
Also, so it was a lot of storms, a lot of floods, a lot of trees falling,
forest fires,
and listen, these are all costs. This is not innocent, and that's why I was saying in the morning that I'm really surprised why we are so keen to be why this solidarity exposed for the people who are hit we can show, but we can hardly show solidarity ex ante. And that's exactly what we have to do, and that's what would be my advice also to your people and to your government. These costs and these problems are among us. So it's much better to avoid to invest in that it will not get worse, than actually when it will get worse, you pay it back, and you pay it also with the suffering.
Otherwise it's a catastrophe, as we say in Greek.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.